It's time to dim the lights, pull the blanket to your chin, and let your mind drift somewhere between the hum of your fan and the clink of distant medieval coins. Welcome to Epic Boring History for Sleep, where we wander through dusty centuries so you can drift into dreams. If you genuinely enjoy this slow wander through the past, you're welcome to like and subscribe gently. Of course, no medieval force required. Tell us in the comments where you're listening from and what hour your candle burns. Now, settle in. You open your eyes not to your room but to the dim interior of a timbered hall. Smoke curls toward a thatched roof. Coins jingle from a merchant's pouch nearby, and you somehow have a chance to become rich. Filthy rich, in the Middle Ages. You wake before dawn, not because you want to, because the rooster does. Loudly, insistently, and far too close to your head. There's no snooze button in the Middle Ages, just a beak and an opinion. Your bed is a bundle of straw that's been compressed into something almost mattress-shaped, though mostly it just smells faintly of livestock and last week's damp. A single wool blanket covers you, scratchy enough to exfoliate, but not thick enough to comfort. You roll over and find a flea the size of your guilt staring back at you. Congratulations, your bed now comes with free roommates. The air in your hut is cold enough to see your breath, each exhale curling upward like a ghost who decided to linger. The walls are made of wattle and daub, that charming medieval combination of sticks and mud that somehow manages to be both solid and drafty. Rain drips through the thatch now and then, landing in the same corner where you've placed an old pot. It's half full of last night's water or this morning's leak. Who can tell anymore? You shiver, pull your blanket tighter, and briefly imagine what it must be like to wake up warm with bread on the table and no mud between your toes. You sit up, brush a few bits of straw from your tunic, and realize that your only real asset in life is your body, and even that, truthfully, belongs partly to your Lord. You owe him rent and labor, taxes and grain, and obedience on demand. Your day is planned without your input. Today you'll haul something heavy, earn something small, and eat something bland. Wealth for you is theoretical, but you have a secret weapon: curiosity. You can stop wondering how those few people, the ones who ride by in silk and shine, actually did it. How do they go from sleeping on straw to sleeping on goose down? You step outside, blinking into the early gray light. The village smells of smoke and livestock, with a hint of humanity that isn't flattering. Chickens peck at the ground like they own it. Smith's forge is already clanging, sending sparks into the mist. Somewhere, a neighbor curses at a stubborn donkey. This is the soundtrack of your life, a rhythmic, repetitive hum of survival. But there are small luxuries, if you know where to look. The first sip of ale at noon, the warmth of a shared fire, the gossip that makes dull days flicker with mischief. You trade jokes the way merchants trade coins, small, shining moments that keep you sane. And still, somewhere deep down, there is a stubborn little ember that refuses to go out, the thought that you could be more. You think about the people who seem untouchably rich, the lords, the bishops, the merchants, who strolled through the marketplace as if the world were built for them. They eat white bread instead of brown. They drink wine instead of water. Their shoes have actual soles. Some of them even own multiple spoons, which in your world might as well count as wizardry. You start to imagine what it might take to get there. Of course, no one in your village really believes in upward mobility. You're born where you are, and you die roughly the same distance from the nearest puddle. The idea of climbing the ladder assumes there's a ladder to begin with. But there are rumors, tales of people who somehow made it. The son of a miller, who became a merchant. The pious clerk who found favor with a bishop. The lucky soldier who earned land by surviving wars that should have killed him. Stories that start in huts like yours with people just as poor, just as tired, and just as unwilling to stay that way. As you walk toward the fields, the earth crunches beneath your shoes, thin leather that has seen better centuries. The soil here is rich, even if you aren't. You run your fingers through it and think, maybe this is where fortunes begin. Not in gold or spice or stolen crowns, but in dirt. The kind of dirt that feeds kingdoms, fattens lords, and on a good day buys you an extra loaf of bread. Your mind wanders as you hoe the ground. The rhythm of work becomes a kind of dull meditation. You start to notice how wealth in this world is less about brilliance and more about ownership. Who controls the land, who taxes the work, who writes the rules. And it dawns on you that perhaps money isn't earned, it's claimed. The rich just found better ways to make other people do the work. When you pause for a moment, Leaning on your hoe, the sun has begun to climb. The village comes alive, the baker hauling dough, the blacksmith cursing metal, the children chasing chickens instead of education. Everyone's trying in their own small way to turn labor into survival. But somewhere beyond this field, men and women are turning survival into profit. And that thought, dangerous and dazzling, sticks in your mind? You imagine owning something, a patch of land, a cart of goods, a right that others have to pay you for? The very idea feels intoxicating. Maybe you can't read, maybe you can't write, but you can scheme. You can watch, learn, adapt. Because wealth isn't magic, it's a game. A cruel one, yes, but not an impossible one. As you trudge back toward your hut at dusk, your hands are sore, your back aches, your stomach growls, but your thoughts are sharper. You've started to see patterns, how grain turns into bread, bread into trade, trade into silver. Somewhere in that chain, there must be a place for you to slip in, to bend the rules just enough to gain a foothold. You don't know it yet, but today, this ordinary muddy day is the first step, the step where you stop being poor in mind, even if your purse is still empty. You've begun to watch the game instead of just playing your role in it. You begin to realize that the world, at least this medieval one, is made almost entirely of dirt. It's not just the kind under your fingernails, but the kind that decides who eats, who starves, and who sleeps under. Stone ceilings instead of straw. Everything starts with the land. It stretches in every direction, indifferent and patient, quietly growing fortunes and burying ambitions at the same time. You've spent your whole life walking on it, never quite realizing that it was the one thing worth owning. Oh, land is power. The kind that doesn't glitter, but never fades. The nobles have it, the church has it, even the monasteries hoard it under the pretense of holiness. Fields, pastures, vineyards, forests. Every inch means control. The one who owns the dirt controls the grain, and the one who controls the grain controls everyone who needs to eat. Which, inconveniently, is everyone. You stand at the edge of a field that belongs to someone else, watching the stalks of wheat ripple like a golden sea. You've worked these fields for years, bending your back for someone else's profit. Every seed you plant is a coin that will never end up in your pocket. Still, the idea of ownership begins to itch in your mind. You imagine what it would feel like if the soil you turned over belonged to you, not to a lord, not to God, but to you. The thought feels outrageous, almost treasonous, but deliciously so. If you want to get rich, truly rich, you'll need a piece of land with your name whispered over it. But getting that isn't simple. You can't just walk up to a manor and say, "I'll take that meadow. Thank you," in this world. Land is inherited, granted, or stolen, and only one of those options is even remotely open to you. So, you start small. You make yourself useful to someone who already has it. Maybe you become a reeve, the man who manages the lord's estate, collecting rent, overseeing crops, and keeping peasants in line. It's not glamorous, but it gives you a seat near the money. You learn what soil is worth, how weather affects yield, when to sell grain high, and when to store it. You discover that knowledge in this world is just as valuable as land because it helps you recognize weakness in those who have too much of it. Some landowners are lazy, others are drunk, or pious to the point of negligence. You watch their fields go untended, their barns collapse, their debts quietly grow. And one day, when an opportunity presents itself, perhaps a widow can't pay her tithe, or a knight rides off to war and docentee return, you offer to help. A few coins here, a favor there, and suddenly, a small patch of land becomes yours. Not much, just enough to grow food and pride. Owning land changes how people look at you. You're still muddy, still poor by noble standards, but now you're someone. When you walk through the village, people nod differently. They ask you for work instead of sharing theirs. The local steward invites you to the tavern, and for the first time, you buy the ale instead of earning it. But you soon learn that land isn't just wealth, it's responsibility, and occasionally, headache. Fences break, tenants complain, and rain never seems to arrive when it should. The same earth that builds fortunes also swallows them. You watch entire crops fail under a sky that refuses to weep. You realize that being rich in the Middle Ages means depending on weather patterns that couldn't want to care less about your ambition. Still, there's something deeply satisfying about owning dirt. It feels ancient, sacred, inevitable. Even the way people talk about it carries reverence. the good earth they call it, as though it's a living creature. You begin to sense the rhythm of it, the way spring turns to harvest, the way a field sleeps under frost and wakes in sunlight. You begin to understand why kings fight wars over it, why lords build castles to protect it, and why peasants will bleed just to work it. The more land you acquire, the more you see its hidden layers. Not just the soil, but what lies beneath it, the rents, the rights, the obligations. Collect fees for grazing, tithes for grain, fines for trespass. It's not glamorous, but it adds up. Every coin you gather comes from the same quiet source. People like your former self, paying in sweat for the privilege of staying alive. It's a strange, guilty kind of power. You start to dress better, speak slower. The mud on your boots doesn't bother you anymore. It feels like a crown. When you sit by the hearth at night, you think of all the acres sleeping under the moon and how each one whispers your name now. And yet a nagging thought returns. This wealth is slow. It grows at the pace of roots, not trade winds. You can't exactly double your fortune overnight by waiting for crops to ripen. There must be quicker ways, faster, more daring paths to fortune. You've learned that land is power, yes, but also limitation. To grow beyond the soil, you'll need to follow the goods that move, not the ground that stays still. So, one day, when a caravan passes through town, its wagons loaded with cloth and spice, its merchants wearing smiles that hint at silver, you find yourself watching with new interest. You've mastered the art of owning dirt. Now it's time to see what happens when profit starts to move. The road calls to you long, uneven, and filled with possibilities that smell faintly of profit and danger. You've spent enough time with the soil to know that it grows crops, not fortunes. Land is noble wealth, but trade is restless, alive, and perhaps a little dishonest. You decide to follow the path of the merchant, part traveler, part gambler, part magician, turning ordinary goods into shimmering coin. Your first journey begins before dawn. The world is damp and quiet, the horizon blushing faintly pink. A pack mule snorts beside you, unimpressed with your grand ambitions. You've loaded it with wool, that humble miracle of the medieval economy. Soft, sturdy, endlessly useful, and, if you play your cards right, incredibly lucrative. Now, you've heard that merchants in Flanders and Florence grow fat on it. If they can, why not you? The road is not kind. It greets you with mud, thieves, and the constant smell of something dead somewhere nearby. But there's freedom here too, the kind that tastes like risk and smells faintly of wood smoke. Every village you pass brings new markets, new dialects, new ways to cheat and be cheated. One Leonard, I wear a world with her, I look at where a clever exaggeration, a charming grin, and the right measure of confidence can turn a dull product into a must-have luxury. At first, you sell wool and cloth. Later, you dabble in salt, because nothing sells like survival. Salt preserves meat, cures hides, and adds flavor to lives that otherwise taste of barley gruel and regret. People will pay anything for it, which makes it an ideal commodity for someone like you. You learn to measure not just goods, but human desire. Everyone wants something, and the best merchants are simply those who price that want correctly. In towns, you wander markets that feel like small worlds. Stalls overflow with furs, spices, tin, and dreams. The air smells of smoke, tallow, and ambition. You overhear deals whispered in Latin, French, Arabic, a symphony of greed in multiple keys. A merchant's fortune depends less on luck and more on listening. You keep your ears open, your purse closed, and your smile always polite. There's an art to haggling that borders on poetry. Start high, they go low, and somewhere in the middle, both parties pretend they've won. You learn to read eyes more than words, to spot hesitation like a falcon spots a rabbit. And as your purse grows heavier, your conscience grows lighter. You tell yourself you're providing a service, connecting faraway places, feeding trade, weaving the world together. It's true in a way. But deep down, you know you're chasing something less noble and more intoxicating, the thrill of profit. Every coin that clinks into your hand feels like validation, proof that cleverness matters more than birthright. You start to dress better, eat better, even walk differently. In the marketplace, people nod at you with recognition. They call you good sir instead of hey you. It's subtle, but it matters. Sometimes at night, you sit by the fire in a roadside inn and listen to the other merchants brag. They speak of Venice, Alexandria, bruges of ships heavy with silk and spices, of profits so large they sound mythical. One man claims to have seen nutmeg worth more than gold. You'd laugh, but quietly, because you know that behind every exaggeration lies a spark of truth. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of your mule and your modest wares, lie goods that can make you truly rich. You start to dream bigger. You imagine sailing across seas, bargaining in bazaars filled with voices and colors beyond imagining. You picture yourself returning home not as a humble trader, but as someone important, someone whose arrival turns heads and whose wealth could rival a baroness. Of course, trade is not all miracles. There are pirates, taxes, and the occasional betrayal. You learn the fine art of bribery. A coin slipped to the right guard. A barrel accidentally left behind for the local reeve. The line between merchant and smuggler is very thin and very profitable. You walk it carefully, smiling all the while. Sometimes, though, the dangers feel worth it. You see the first glimpse of Venetian glass, fragile, shimmering, more beautiful than anything made of sand should be. You touch a bolt of silk so smooth it feels like cool water. Smell pepper, cinnamon, cloves, scents that make ordinary stew smell like heaven. You begin to understand why people call trade a miracle. It turns the faraway into the tangible, the exotic into the everyday. You're no longer the farmer tied to a patch of dirt. You're a citizen of the road, a thread in the vast web of medieval commerce. The world seems wider, and you can almost hear it breathing, a slow rhythm of goods moving, coins clinking, people dreaming. And yet, as your fortune grows, you start to notice something else. The invisible walls that even wealth can't easily cross. Nobles look at you with polite disdain. The church watches your profits with raised eyebrows. No matter how rich a merchant becomes, he's still a tradesman, not a gentleman. The dirt under your nails may be gone, but the stain of labor lingers. Still, you can't go back. You've seen too much, tasted too much freedom. If the nobility won't accept you, perhaps you'll build your own kind of nobility. You'll make yourself respectable, recognized, untouchable. And in the Middle Ages, there's only one way to do that. You join the guild. You've made it past the muddy fields and the markets that smell faintly of sweat, onions, and overcooked ambition. You've walked the road of the merchant, the gambler of goods, but now the game changes. You want stability, protection, maybe even prestige. You want to stop being a wandering soul and start being someone. That's where the guild comes in. A guild, in the medieval world, is less a workplace and more a religion of craft. It's a fraternity, a fortress, and a cartel all rolled into one. If you want to sell your wares without being chased out of town by angry rivals or fined by the city watch, you'll need their blessing. And that blessing doesn't come cheap. Your first encounter with a guild hall is humbling. The building looms over the square, carved stone, stained glass, and a door that could survive a siege. Inside, it smells of wax, parchment, and authority. Men, and occasionally women, though they're outnumbered 10-1, sit around heavy oak tables, drinking ale that probably tastes like hierarchy. You feel small, but also strangely exhilarated. This is the beating heart of the city's craft and commerce. To join, you must prove yourself worthy. Not just rich, skilled. The guild doesn't care if you've made a small fortune on wool or salt. They care if you know the trade, the craft, because that is what keeps their reputation spotless and their profits safe. So, you begin again, in a sense. Apprentice, journeyman, master, the holy trinity of progress. As an apprentice, you work for a master in exchange for food, shelter, and a series of life lessons that involve being yelled at for touching the wrong tools. You sleep in a corner of the workshop, eat crusts, and smell perpetually of whatever your trade produces, leather, ink, smoke, or worse. Your hands blister, your back aches. But every day, your fingers learn something your mind didn't know yesterday. After years of this quiet torture, you become a journeyman. You can finally travel. Journey, hence the name, and work under different masters in different cities. You carry a small chest of tools and a large amount of hope. You earn wages now, which makes you feel independent, though never quite comfortable. You start to collect not just coins, but stories. The baker who kneads in silence because his first wife ran off with a monk. The blacksmith who forges horseshoes while reciting psalms to keep the devil out of the iron. Every workshop is a world, every craft its own strange faith. And then, after more years, years of patience, scars, and the occasional bribe, comes the moment you've been waiting for. You create your masterpiece. Literally. The guild requires you to make one perfect item that proves your worth. Flawless sword, a delicate lock, a tapestry that looks like it could breathe. The masters inspect it with the seriousness of judges at a medieval talent show. If they nod, if they deem your work good enough, your name enters the guild rolls. You are now a master craftsman. You can open your own shop, take on apprentices, and display the guild sign above your door. That sign, often just a painted symbol or carved emblem, is a promise. This person's work is honest, skilled, and properly taxed. You hang your new sign with pride. For the first time, you belong to something powerful. Customers come not because they trust you, but because they trust the guild behind you. That trust, like the smell of bread in a baker's shop, draws people in. Life as a guild member is comfortable if you play by the rules. The guild sets prices, controls competition, and decides who gets to open shops. It's the medieval version of a monopoly, except with more beer and Latin phrases. Pay dues, attend meetings, and occasionally wear matching robes that make everyone look like they're auditioning for a secret society. Inside those meetings, you hear gossip and politics in equal measure. One craftsman accuses another of using cheaper dyes. Someone else argues about whose apprentice stole whose design. The guildmaster, whose beard alone could command obedience, bangs the table and restores order. You sip your ale and realize this is less about craft now and more about control. The guild offers protection, yes, from thieves, bad customers, and even the city's unpredictable taxes. But it also builds walls. Innovation becomes dangerous, change suspicious. You can't just invent something new without permission. That would upset the balance. The guilds love tradition almost as much as they love fees. Still, you thrive. You hire an apprentice, someone as nervous as you once were. You teach them, grumble about their mistakes, and secretly enjoy watching them improve. You attend feast days, drink at guild banquets, and argue about prices with other masters while pretending to be civilized. It's all part of the ritual, part of belonging. And yet sometimes as you sit in your tidy workshop surrounded by the hum of saws or the clink of metal, you wonder what's next. You've climbed from dirt to trade, from trade to mastery. You've joined the circle of respectability. But wealth? Real wealth, the kind that buys titles and castles, still feels far away. Outside you hear the bells of the cathedral ring. The church, ever present, ever watchful. You glance at your guild seal and realize that, for all your progress, true power in this age doesn't belong to merchants or craftsmen. It belongs to those who trade not in goods, but in souls. You have learned how to make things good things, solid, respectable things that don't break when someone sneezes on them. But now you discover that in the Middle Ages, making is only half the battle. The other half? Making it count. And that, dear traveler, means coin. Money in the medieval world is a fickle thing, part symbol, part metal, part magic trick. You can hold it in your hand, but you can never quite trust it. Kings change, borders shift, purity wavers. One day your silver penny buys a meal, the next it buys a rumor. and yet it remains the ultimate dream of anyone hoping to climb from mud to marble. You keep a few coins in your purse now, clinking softly as you walk, a small but satisfying sound. Each one carries a monarch's face, flattened and distorted like a saint viewed through fog. The king's nose might look heroic, or it might look like it's melting. Either way, that little stamp turns a lump of metal into something holy, royal currency. To question its worth is to question the crown. Coinage is power literally pressed into metal. Mints are sacred places where wealth is conjured from heat, hammer, and decree. The mint master is half alchemist, half bureaucrat, his hands blackened with soot and secrets. You imagine stepping inside one, the smell of hot metal and singed wool, the rhythmic thud of hammers, the hiss as new coins cool on stone slabs. Workers handle molten silver with the same reverence monks handle relics. You might think about starting your own mint, a clever idea until you remember that counterfeiting is punishable by death, usually in unpleasantly inventive ways. So you stick to legal commerce and let the kings worry about metallurgy. Still, you notice something curious. Money isn't just minted by rulers, it's also made by those who know how to move it. The merchants who trade in bulk, the lenders who risk a few coins to make more. Some are local money changers, sitting in the market with their little scales and cups, muttering prayers to St. Matthew, the patron of accountants. Others are families with vast networks like the Lombards, the Medici, or the Fuggers, who can shift fortunes across Europe faster than a messenger on horseback. But the everyday business of coin is messy. There are too many currencies, each with its own weight and purity. English pennies, Venetian ducats, French livres, Florentine florins. It's enough to make your head spin, so you learn the trick. Always keep a set of scales in your pouch. We weigh your money before you trust it. You bite the edge of a coin to test its metal, not because it helps much, but because it looks impressively skeptical. Inflation is not a modern invention either. You notice the baker raising prices because the grain was poor this year. The tanner claims his hides are rarer. The tavern keeper just smirks and says, "The king's taxes." Everyone blames someone else, but in truth, everyone's chasing the same thing. More coins, fewer hours, less work. Medieval economics in a nutshell. If you save enough, you can start lending discreetly, of course. Usury, or charging interest, is technically forbidden by the church. But loopholes are the lifeblood of prosperity. You call it a fee for service or a gift of gratitude, and if anyone frowns, you point to the monastery. Monks are famously holy, yet some of them run the best banks in Europe. Faith, it turns out, makes excellent collateral. At first your lending is small, a few silver pennies here, a handful of copper there. But coin breeds coin. Before long, you've got artisans, bakers, even minor knights who owe you. You keep careful notes, scratched in code on scraps of parchment. It's not glamorous, but it's intoxicating, the quiet thrill of watching your silver multiply while you sleep. And yet, there's a subtle danger to this new wealth. Money whispers differently than land or labor. It can vanish overnight in a bad shipment or a bad war. A noble might decide your debt is unjust and settle it with a sword instead of repayment. Or worse, a royal decree might suddenly standardize the realm's coinage, which always seems to mean your silver is now worth half as much. Still, the coin holds its charm. You begin to see it less as metal and more as a kind of belief. Every exchange is an act of faith. You give a piece of silver, trusting that someone, somewhere, will honor its value. That trust, fragile as it is, keeps the world turning. By candlelight, you spread your coins on the table. The light catches on each one, tiny suns gleaming on worn metal. You think about how many hands they've passed through, peasants, soldiers, merchants, kings. You realize that money isn't really owned. It's borrowed from time. You hold it now, but it will outlive you, moving endlessly from palm to palm, shaping destinies. Outside, church bells echo over the rooftops. They remind you that coin alone isn't the highest currency here. Faith, that invisible wealth, moves entire kingdoms. You pocket your silver and glance toward the cathedral spire glowing against the night. Because if coins are the veins of medieval life, the church is its heart, and if you're clever, you'll learn how to make both beat in your favor. By now, your coin pouch has begun to carry some pleasant weight, that small, satisfying clink that says you've moved beyond survival and into the soft, silken promise of success. And silk, as it happens, is exactly where your next fortune lies. In the Middle Ages, wealth didn't just glitter, it shimmered. and nothing shimmered more seductively than cloth. Forget gold for a moment. The true mark of luxury was fabric that caught the light like water and whispered when it moved. Cloth wasn't just fashion. It was status, politics, and sometimes salvation. You step into a dyer's quarter, the medieval equivalent of a fashion district, except with more fumes and fewer polite coughs. The air is heavy with vinegar, urine, and crushed plants. The cobbles are stained with every shade of ambition: indigo blues, madder reds, welled yellows. The dyers themselves look like alchemists who've been color-coded by their trade. You watch one stir a bubbling vat with the solemn concentration of a priest. If the hue comes out wrong, an entire shipment and a reputation could be lost. Cloth, after all, is the backbone of medieval commerce. Towns rise on the backs of looms. Bruges, Florence, London, all spin their fortunes from wool and silk, linen and dye. Even the simplest peasant tunic must be woven, stitched and bartered for. And where there is necessity, there is profit. You learn quickly that the secret isn't in making cloth, but in moving it. The true cloth kings aren't the weavers bent over looms in dim workshops. They read the middlemen who understand how to connect one city's needs to another's vanity. They buy rough wool in England, send it to Flanders to be spun, to Italy to be dyed, and sell it back to nobles in France for 10 times the price. You could call it trade or, more accurately, teleportation with extra paperwork. The first time you handle fine cloth, true, imported silk, it doesn't feel real. It slides through your fingers like liquid light. You imagine what it would mean to own such fabric, not as a merchant, but as a symbol of arrival. Kings wear it. Queens are buried in it. And soon, perhaps you might make your living draping the powerful in glory. The trick is knowing where to stand between production and prestige. You invest in looms, perhaps, or finance a dye workshop. You send agents to fairs, Champagne, Bruges, Pisa, where bolts of fabric are displayed like treasure. The fairs are a wonder in themselves, rows upon rows of color, the hum of bargaining in half a dozen languages, and the ever-present sound of someone shouting about taxes. You learn to haggle, to flatter, to pretend disinterest when your heart is pounding over a rare bolt of crimson velvet. Of course, the church occasionally frowns upon vanity. Priests warn against luxury, even as bishops wear robes worth a small fortress. But that's the strange morality of the Middle Ages: sin for the poor, splendor for the holy. And you, the ambitious merchant, learn to navigate that hypocrisy like a seasoned sailor steering through fog. You start to notice how power dresses itself. Royal courts compete in texture: French brocade, Byzantine silk, Florentine velvet. A well-chosen tunic can flatter an alliance. A poorly chosen color can insult a kingdom. You invest not just in fabric, but in fashion itself, an invisible weapon that conquers without blood. Your warehouse fills with bolts of cloth from every corner of Europe and beyond. Wool from England dyed in Flanders, trimmed with Italian gold thread. You've become part of an international web, a silk road that doesn't cross deserts but city walls. At night, you sit by candlelight, counting ledgers written in a dozen hands. Your wealth no longer clinks. It folds, soft and silent. But there's another kind of fortune in cloth, one that can be worn, displayed, even disguised. Sumptuary laws begin to appear, decreeing who may wear what. Only nobles may wear certain colors or trims, they say. Only the elite may shimmer. You smile, because you know the truth. Laws are merely obstacles for those without creativity. Gold thread can be hidden inside seams, forbidden colors worn beneath cloaks. The wealthy may flaunt their privilege, but the clever grow rich selling it to them. Every time a noble walks through the market draped in luxury, you see more than elegance, you see advertisement. Every robe is your triumph. Every train that drags across a cathedral floor, a small echo of your prosperity. You are no longer just a merchant. You are a maker of appearances, a supplier of dreams. Still, even as you rise, you can feel the limits of cloth's kingdom. Fashion changes faster than loyalty. What dazzles today looks foolish tomorrow, and wealth built on vanity can unravel as easily as thread. But as you run your fingers over a length of shimmering silk imported from the East, dyed in secret hues, destined for a royal shoulder, you realize something profound. In a world still haunted by famine, plague, and war, people crave beauty. Beauty, even if fleeting, is power. Outside, the sound of church bells fades into the murmur of the marketplace. The scent of dye gives way to that of spice and oil. And as you close your account books for the night, you begin to wonder if cloth can make kings, what might spice do for the soul? By now, your fortune smells faintly of wool, ink, and risk. You've clothed kings and lined noble wardrobes with silk so fine it could whisper. But one day you walk through the market and catch a scent that stops you cold, sharp, warm, alive. Pepper, just pepper, black, wrinkled, and utterly ordinary looking, yet worth ounce for ounce more than gold. Welcome to spice fever. In the Middle Ages, spices weren't just flavors, they were miracles in powder form. Cinnamon for your wine, cloves for your breath, nutmeg for your soul. Each pinch promised refinement, health, and the illusion of holiness. Because if your stew smells expensive, perhaps your soul does too. You start small, trading peppercorns brought from Venice or Genoa. The Venetian galleys sail from the Levant, loaded with sacks of brown treasure. Pepper from India, ginger from Arabia, saffron from Persia. The scent of their cargo drifts through the ports like incense. Men whisper that the East is paved with spice, and that somewhere, beyond deserts and crusades, grows a tree whose fruit could make you rich forever. You buy a small batch of pepper. It doesn't look like much, hard, dry beads, like seeds of darkness. But when you grind one, the aroma blooms. You sell it to a noble household, and the cook pays twice your asking price just to impress a visiting bishop. You realize something profound. Spice is not food, it's theater. Soon you're in deeper. You invest in a caravan, not a sleek one with music and tents, but the medieval kind. Camels, heat, dust, and danger. The spice routes stretch across lands you'll never see, from India through Persia, across Arabia, to the Mediterranean ports. Every mile adds to the cost, and every hand that touches the spice takes its share. By the time it reaches your table, a handful of peppercorns has been worth a night's ransom. Europe can't get enough of it. People put pepper in wine, cinnamon on meat, and ginger in places. Ginger probably doesn't belong. Monks claim spices warm the body and purify the blood. Doctors prescribe them for fevers, melancholy, and marital boredom. Even the church approves a bit of spice at the high table is a mark of divine blessing. But as with any obsession, the fever comes with delusion. You meet merchants who boast of sailing beyond Egypt to lands where nutmeg grows wild. They draw maps on scraps of parchment, crude sketches of the Indies, which might as well be the edge of the world. You smile politely. Everyone in the spice trade tells tall tales. It's part of the aroma. You hire agents by ships, and quietly dream of direct trade. No middlemen, no Venetians, with their smug monopoly. The profits could be biblical. But for now, you must settle for what comes through the ports. You deal with Italian factors who smile like cats, always knowing something you don't. They sell you pepper at one price in the morning, then buy it back from you that same evening for twice as much. You don't mind, you're learning. In your warehouse, the scent of spice begins to mingle with wool and cloth. Pepper, saffron, and nutmeg, your new trinity. You start keeping ledgers that read like recipes. 2 sacks pepper, 1 chest cloves, 10 bolts of red linen. Your fortune now depends as much on the nose as on the eye. And it's not just for the rich. Even small households begin to dream of spice. A pinch here, a whiff there, to taste what kings taste. So you make clever blends, cheap herbs cut with a hint of the real thing. The common folk think they're feasting like nobles, and you quietly double your profits. The age of marketing, you realize, has already begun. But spice is more than flavor, it's politics. The kings of Europe begin to notice that for all their titles, they rely on merchants like you to bring them the scent of paradise. Wars are fought not for land, but for sea routes. Monarchs send explorers, or, more accurately, desperate men with maps and ambitions, to find the source of this aromatic gold. You sit in your counting room at dusk, running a peppercorn through your fingers. It's astonishing that something so small could drive ships across oceans, topple empires, and fill monasteries with the smell of faraway sunlight. You understand now, this isn't just a trade. It's a fever, one that no one will ever truly cure. Outside, a sailor passes your window, humming a tune about new routes and unknown islands. You catch the tune's rhythm, hopeful, reckless, salt-soaked. The world is expanding, and for once, you're not merely watching, you're profiting. But the seas are calling louder now, and the scent of the east lingers in the wind. You begin to wonder what lies beyond Venice, beyond the horizon, beyond all this fragrant chaos. Perhaps fortune no longer lies in counting peppercorns, but in sailing for the source. You've made it, or so it seems. The warehouse smells of spice, your coffers jingle like wind chimes in a summer breeze, and your name has begun to travel farther than your caravans. Children in the market whisper it when you pass. Nobles pretend not to recognize you, and then quietly send for your wares. For the first time, your nights are peaceful until they aren't, because in the Middle Ages, success isn't a reward. It's a warning. Prosperity, you learn, is a dangerous perfume. Too rich a scent, and it draws attention from tax collectors, thieves, rivals, and the ever-watchful eyes of the church. You're not just a merchant anymore, you're a target with good shoes. It starts subtly. The local authorities raise your taxes for the maintenance of city. Defenses, though you suspect those defenses mostly protect their own pockets. Guild brothers who once congratulated you at banquets now mutter about fairness and price fixing. You catch the word greedy tossed around the tavern, always by men who owe you money. Even your apprentices start to whisper when you walk by, their loyalty measured by the coin you pay them each month. At first, you laugh it off. Every prosperous merchant faces envy, you tell yourself. Let them talk while you count. But envy, like mold, thrives in damp corners and dark hearts. You start noticing small things. A shipment delayed too long. A trusted clerk suddenly missing with the ledger. The city guard inspecting your warehouse by royal order. Then there are the rumors about watered wine, bad dye, false weights. None of them true. But truth is slow, and gossip travels on horseback. And then there's the church. At first, they were your friends. You donated candles, paid tithes, even funded a new altar cloth or two. But as your profits climb, sermons begin to sound suspiciously specific. The priest talks about the rich man in the eye of a needle, his gaze lingering just a moment too long. You know he doesn't mean the king. The church has its own complicated relationship with wealth. It condemns greed, yet owns more land than any lord. It warns against materialism, yet decorates every chapel with gold leaf and lapis lazuli. You understand? Of course, it's not money they fear, but those who make it too independently. So you make a clever move. You endow a small chapel. Commission a few masses for your soul's health. A little piety goes a long way in buying peace of mind and peace from tax assessors. Still, the paranoia grows. You hire guards for your house. You lock your warehouse doors with iron bars. At night, you wake to the creak of floorboards and wonder if it's the wind or a disgruntled debtor. It's prosperity, it turns out, is noisy company. Even your own tastes change. You used to love the smell of spice and trade ink, the thrill of a deal struck under a canvas tent. Now, the scent of pepper makes you tired. Coins don't sparkle, they accuse. You buy finer food, softer clothes, richer wine, and each one dulls the satisfaction a little more. The higher you climb, the thinner the air becomes. You begin to see the danger not in poverty, but in comfort. Poverty is simple. It keeps you hungry, sharp, and moving. Wealth is heavy, it slows you down, invites enemies you can't name, and obligations you can't refuse. One evening, you attend a banquet at a noble's hall. The torches flicker, the tables groan under plates of gilded meats and perfumed sauces. The noble raises a toast to prosperity and trade, his smile tight as parchment. You lift your goblet and realize you're surrounded by people who depend on your goods but secretly despise your success. They want what you have but not the story that built it. Later, as you walk home under a sky full of soot-gray stars, you pass a beggar wrapped in rags. He looks up, eyes reflecting torchlight. For a moment, you envy him. He has nothing, and therefore, nothing to lose. But there's no going back now. You've learned too much, earned too much, risked too much. The city hums with your legacy ships, markets, accounts, debts. You've built a web of influence that stretches farther than you can walk. You can't step away. You can only play smarter. So, you adapt. You diversify your investments, spread your fortune across safer ventures land, mills, perhaps even lending to the crown itself. The irony ice and tea lost on you. The same rulers who taxed you now borrow from you. Wealth, it seems, has a way of circling back. Still late at night, you feel a familiar tugga, desire to trade again, to chase something new. Because even as you guard your treasure, you can sense it slipping. The world is changing. Ships grow larger. Routes grow longer. Profit is migrating toward the sea. You sigh, glance at the horizon, and understand that prosperity itself can become a trap. Too much of it, and you stop moving. Too little, and you can't. The real secret isn't in riches, in motion. And as the first light of dawn spills across your counting room, you make your decision. You won't risk it again. One last time, where the scent of salt and wind promises new empires. It begins as most dangerous ideas do, with a sermon. You sit in the back pew, half listening while the priest drones about sin salvation and the spiritual hazards of material success. His voice rolls through the nave like slow thunder, echoing between the stone arches. The air smells of candle wax and damp wool. You try not to look too prosperous, but it's hard when your cloak is lined with fur and your boots actually match. Then mid-homily, he says something that catches your attention. It is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. You glance down at your hands, smooth, ringed, and very much guilty. The priest goes on, as they do, about the vanity of worldly riches and the promise of eternal treasure in heaven. But you're already thinking like a merchant. Eternal treasure. Now that sounds like an interesting investment, because if there's one thing you've learned, it's that profit isn't always measured in coin. In the Middle Ages, faith is its own kind of currency, and the church is the safest bank around. You start small. A donation to repair the chapel roof. A few candles, some holy water, perhaps a silver chalice for the glory of God. The priest thanks you profusely, and for the first time in years you feel truly respected. It's remarkable what a little silver can do for one's soul and one's reputation. Soon, you begin to understand how the divine economy really works. The church, for all its sermons about humility, is an empire of stone and gold. Every saint's relic, every stained glass window, every abbey orchard, all of it runs on donations like yours. The holier the cause, the higher the return. In reputation, if not interest. Other merchants catch on. Suddenly everyone's endowing monasteries or buying indulgences. You can practically hear the coins clinking into heaven's treasury. One man funds a hospital, another builds a bridge for the souls of travelers, and of course their names are neatly carved into plaques for all eternity, or at least until the next fire. You don't mind? You understand the game. This is the medieval version of public relations. In an age when wealth is suspicious and poverty is saintly, the trick is to make your fortune look like virtue. So, you go bigger. You commission a chapel of your own, nothing extravagant, just enough to make a statement. You hire masons to carve angels into the lintels, painters to splash saints across the walls. You even arrange for a mass to be said every week for your family's souls. It's the kind of investment that promises dividends in both worlds. And it works. Suddenly, the whispers change. No one calls you greedy anymore. Now you're a man of faith. The same priest who once glared at your fur cloak now praises your generosity of spirit. You haven't changed just your marketing strategy. But divine investments come with divine complications, because once the church recognizes you as a benefactor, it never stops asking. Another donation for the orphanage, small gift for the bishop's new vestments, a modest contribution to help fund a crusade. It's endless. Each request sounds polite, but there's a weight behind it, like a velvet glove covering an iron hand. You start to realize that in this holy marketplace, grace is not given freely. It's negotiated. The church holds the monopoly on salvation, and indulgences are its stock certificates. You can buy time off in purgatory literally by the day. You pay anyway. Not because you believe the paperwork of heaven is binding, but because everyone else does. And reputation, you've learned, is worth more than gold. Still, there's a strange comfort in it all. The chanting of monks at dawn, the flicker of candles reflected on stone, the rhythm of Latin prayers, these things quiet the mind. For a moment, you almost believe that your soul is safely stored away, accruing interest in heaven's vault. But faith, like trade, is built on trust. Trust is fragile. You hear stories. Abbots who gamble with donations, bishops who live like princes, relics that turn out to be suspiciously similar to chicken bones. One evening, over wine, a fellow merchant laughs that he has bought indulgences for sins he hasn't even committed yet. Just in case, you laugh too, but it sticks in your throat. Or deep down, you wonder if you've been investing in smoke. Still, you can't stop. Piety has become your brand now. You fund another monastery, then a school for scribes. You even consider sponsoring a crusade, though you have no desire to leave your comfortable bed for the desert. The irony doesn't escape you. You're buying virtue like cloth by the yard. Yet late at night, when the city sleeps and the bells toll for Compline, you feel something else stirring beneath the peace. A question. If heaven can be bought, then what's it really worth? You stare into the candle flame, watching the wax melt down like time itself. Maybe you think, the real investment isn't in buildings or relics or indulgences, but in the quiet things that leave no record. Mercy, humility, forgiveness. Qualities that don't earn applause, but might actually buy peace. Still, when the morning comes, you'll write another check. Because faith, like trade, is a habit and you're too deep in both to stop now. And somewhere, between coin and confession, between prayer and profit, you begin to sense that your next venture might lie not in heaven or on land, but across the sea. You've smelled gold before you've seen it, not the metal kind. This gold smells of yeast, sweat, and opportunity. You arrive at the city gates just as the sun lifts above the rooftops, spilling pale light onto a forest of spires and chimneys. The drawbridge creaks, the guards wave you through, and suddenly you're surrounded by noise and motion carts creaking, bells ringing, pigs protesting their own existence. The medieval city is alive, and to a merchant with quick hands and quicker wits, it's pure, glittering possibility. We call it urban gold, not the coins themselves, though you'll certainly want plenty of those. Urban gold is the pulse of trade, the thrum of workshops and markets, the hum of humanity packed shoulder to shoulder inside the city walls. You can almost hear prophets singing from every window. The streets are narrow, crooked things, more like veins than roads, pumping people and goods through the city's heart. You follow the scent of bread and roasted fish toward the market square. Here, the stalls bloom like colorful fungi. Bolts of wool, barrels of wine, baskets of apples, heaps of iron tools. The clatter of scales and the murmur of haggling blend into one soft, chaotic lullaby of commerce. If you want to grow rich in the Middle Ages, this is where it happens, not on the battlefield, but behind a counter. Find your spot along the row of traders and begin to set up shop. Perhaps you sell spices or fine linen, or maybe a little of everything. Your goods aren't the rarest, but you've got something better: charm. You flatter nobles, gossip with monks, and make peasants feel like they're getting away with a deal. In truth, you're making a small fortune 1/2 penny at a time. The trick is to move with the rhythm of the city. You rise with the bell for prime, open your stall as the square fills, and keep one ear tuned to the latest news prices, rumors. Ships arriving from the east. Information is as valuable as coin here. You trade it in whispers. Who's short on grain, who's flush with cloth, who's marrying whom. You learn to smile while you calculate. The city itself teaches you how to think like a rich man. Every building is a lesson in ambition. The merchants' houses grow taller each year, as if wealth itself is trying to climb above the noise. Their windows gleam with imported glass, their doorways guarded by carved lions or saints. From the upper floors, women in embroidered gowns lean out to survey the market like queens. You can almost hear the walls whisper, "Work harder, dream higher." You reinvest your earnings, more stock, better scales, a small warehouse by the river. The first time you employ an apprentice, it feels strange to have someone waiting on you. The second time, it feels natural. Soon you have a whole team of them, boys sweeping the shop, girls tallying accounts, a trusted clerk who knows when to keep his mouth shut. But the city gives, and it takes. You can feel its hunger beneath your feet. Fire, disease, and sudden regulation can devour fortunes overnight. A single spark could turn your shop to ash. A whisper of plague could empty your street in days. The same closeness that fuels trade also breeds danger. You buy into a guild, invest in stone instead of timber, maybe even marry into a family with good connections at the town hall. It's not romance, it's insurance. Every so often, You visit the money changers near the cathedral. The smell of wax and metal fills the air. Coins from across Christendom gleam on their tables. Florins, ducats, groats, dirhams. Q watch them weigh and clink, calculating quietly. Each coin represents a handshake, a risk, a promise. The city is the crucible where all those tiny acts of trust melt into gold. At night, when the market is silent and only the rats keep watch, you stand at your window and look down at the square. Lanterns flicker, smoke curls through the alleys, and somewhere a lute plays softly. You realize that this is what you were always chasing. Not just wealth, but the strange, warm comfort of belonging to something vast and humming with life. Urban gold isn't stored in vaults or hoarded in chests. It flows in trade, in talk, in the invisible network of trust that keeps a city breathing. And if you know how to follow that current, you'll never really go hungry again. But even as you count your profits, you can't help noticing the shadows between the lamplight, the beggars at the gate. The apprentices who never made it past the first winter. For every merchant rising, another has fallen. The city's gold, you realize, glitters brightest against the darkness. Still, you turn away from the window and bank the fire. Tomorrow, there will be new deals to strike, new ships arriving, new rumors to chase, and soon enough, a new temptation, the kind of wealth you can't weigh on scales land, titles, and the slippery promise of nobility. You could say, wealth is its own kind of paintbrush. And by now you've learned how to use it, once your gold bought silks, spices, and indulgences. But now you crave something less perishable, something that one tea spoil in a warehouse or sink with a ship. You want immortality, or at least the medieval version of it, your name carved into stone, sung by choirs, remembered in ink and pigment long after your bones are dust. That's where patronage comes in. In a world where art and faith are woven tighter than the threads of a monk's robe, patronage is the closest thing to time travel. You give money, materials, or protection. In return, the artist or architect or composer or poet builds something that whispers your name through the centuries. It's not crass. Oh no, it's pious. At least that's what you tell yourself. You begin modestly. A fresco in your parish church. A new bell for the tower. The kind of gestures that signal gratitude to God and conveniently good taste. Soon, people begin to notice. The priest mentions your name during Mass. A visiting noble compliments your devotion. You smile and nod. And inside, you're already thinking about your next commission. And what a glorious world this new trade is. Painters arrive with pigments more precious than gems lapis from distant mines, vermilion from crushed cinnabar, gold leaf beaten thin as light. You stand beside them as they work, pretending to understand perspective and proportion, while secretly wondering how much of that gold you could melt down into coin again if things went poorly. But art is an investment of a different kind. You start to enjoy the rhythm of it, the scrape of brushes, smell of wet plaster, the hush that falls when a face emerges from color. Maybe this is what real creation feels like, commanding beauty into being, one coin at a time. Of course, it's never just about beauty. Patronage is politics with prettier handwriting. You learn to choose your projects strategically. A chapel near the bishop's residence, a statue that just happens to resemble the local magistrate, a school that teaches your own name in its daily prayers. Every donation buys loyalty, admiration, or at least obligation. It's a kind of chess. The king is God, perhaps, but the pawns are all human and very susceptible to flattery. Soon your house becomes a salon of sorts. Musicians perform in your hall. Poets read verses that miraculously rhyme with your name. The scent of ink and wax mingles with roasted meat and wine. You've discovered the most refined pleasure of wealth, to be surrounded by brilliance that shines a little brighter because of you. You commission a portrait. Why not? Everyone does eventually. The artist studies you with unnerving focus, measuring, sketching, muttering about symmetry. You sit for hours, trying not to look too proud or too sleepy, while the candlelight flickers across the wet paint. When it's done, you stare at the result. You look almost holy. They can't hurt, but patronage carries its own risks. Artists are unpredictable creatures. Some are grateful. Others bite the hand that feeds them, muttering about vision and truth while you're footing the bill. One painter refuses to flatter you, claiming art must honor God alone. You nearly send him packing, but instead you double his fee. Let God have the glory, you decide. You'll settle for the signature. And then there's the gossip. People whisper that your generosity hides ambition, that you fund churches to buy forgiveness, that you sponsor poets because you like the sound of your own praise. You deny it, of course, but privately, you know they're not entirely wrong. Because here's the quiet secret of patronage. It's as much self-portrait as charity. Every chapel, every statue, every song is a mirror that reflects who you want to be remembered as, not who you actually are. Still, the illusion works. The city begins to call you a man of culture. Clergymen speak of your noble soul. You attend feasts where the wine flows, and your name appears in toasts. Fame, it turns out, is as intoxicating as profit only. It burns slower. And somewhere beneath it all, you feel a strange peace. For years, you chased wealth as if it were air itself. Now you realize money is just a tool, a means to carve your story into the world before time erases you completely. But as every merchant knows, investment demands maintenance. Art fades, patrons die, and reputations, no matter how gilded, can tarnish. For now, though, you sit in your hall surrounded by paintings and song, the air thick with candlelight and applause. Outside, the city hums. Somewhere, a rival plots, a deal unravels, a storm gathers over the sea. But tonight, you are eternal or close enough. The city smells different when fortune turns. Once it carried the perfume of success, fresh bread, new coin, smoke from your own hearth. Now it smells of ash, rain, and something uneasy, like a deal gone bad. You've noticed it in small things first. The baker who used to bow as you passed no longer looks up from his oven. The money changer weighs your coin twice. And at market, a rival merchant lets call him Gerard, because every city has a Gerard smiles just a little too long when he greets you. You know that smile? It's the expression of a man who's learned something he shouldn't have. Competition in the Middle Ages isn't polite. There are no patents, no regulations, no friendly rivalries, only survival. If you've built a thriving trade in wool, Gerard will find a way to undercut you. If you import spices, he'll whisper to the customs officers that your shipment was questionable. Sometimes, the city feels less like a marketplace and more like a chessboard played with knives. And yet it's exhilarating. You've spent years climbing this gilded ladder: donations to the church, investments in land, patronage of the arts. You've built a name that glows like a candle in the dark. But candles, as you know, don't last forever. Gerard begins with rumors. He tells buyers that your cloth is watered down, that your silver isn't pure, that your apprentices are thieving. At first, it's laughable. Then, somehow, your newest shipment sits untouched at the docks. Then your credit, once your proudest asset, starts to evaporate. Merchants who once begged for your trust now hesitate, eyes darting toward safer deals. You try to fight back, of course. You send gifts to the mayor's wife, whisper to the bishop's steward, promise favors to the guild masters. Influence is your real coin, and you spend it freely, but it's like patching a leaking roof in a storm. Each repair holds for a moment, then another crack appears. Here in quieter hours, you remember how it began: two ambitious young traders sharing wine, joking about fortunes to be made. Gerard wasn't always an enemy, but rivalry, like rot, grows in secret. The higher you climb, the more enemies you gather at your feet. The city, too, changes its mood. The bells that once sounded like opportunity now toll with anxiety. The guilds tighten their rules. The magistrates demand new fees. A bad harvest ripples through the economy like a fever. When the peasants starve, no one buys silk. You find yourself staring at your ledger by candlelight, tracing the inked lines of credit and debt. Once, it was a map to your success. Now it feels more like a confession. Then, one morning, you wake to the sound of boots outside your door. A summons. Not unexpected, but still unwelcome. You are accused, nothing too serious, of course, of tax evasion, bribery, moral irregularities. You recognize Gerard's hand in every line of it. The hearing is brief, humiliating, and expensive. You pay the fine, smile for the officials, and walk out into the rain. But something inside you shifts. Wealth can buy almost anything except mercy. You try to recover. You sell off a ship, cut your staff, retreat from the market square to a quieter street. The people you once sponsored, now walk past without a nod. Even the monks, once so eager for your donations, seem to find your soul less pressing to save. Still you endure. You've seen fortunes rise and fall like tides. You know the rhythm. You even find a strange peace in the silence that follows ruin. There's freedom in losing everything you can't take with you. But Gerard dear, clever Gerard doesn't know when to stop. His greed outpaces his caution. A few years later, word reaches you that his latest venture, a fleet of ships bound for the Levant, was caught in a storm. Cargo is gone, the investors furious, and Gerard himself has vanished. Last seen arguing on a pier as the tide rose. You feel no triumph, only a weary understanding. The same sea that carried your fortunes can claim them just as easily. In the end, every merchant gambles with the same coin: luck. One evening, as the city settles into its smoky twilight, you walk by the empty market where you once reigned. The square is quieter now. The air smells of rain and baked clay. Somewhere a boy sweeps up the day's dust, his broom whispering against the stones. You think of him, of yourself at that age, hungry, hopeful, certain that you could buy the world if you'd just learned the right price. You smile at the thought. Maybe you did for a while. And somewhere inside you, a new idea stirs one. Not about trade or rivalry, but legacy. If riches can crumble, perhaps names can endure. You've mastered money. You've mastered art. You've even mastered the delicate art of pretending to be humble about both. But there is still one thing missing from your glittering collection of achievements, something that can be bought in the marketplace or painted on a chapel wall. A title. You've noticed how people react differently when a noble walks by. The same merchants who haggle you to the halfpenny bow, so low they might sweep the street with their sleeves. A noble can arrive late to dinner, speak nonsense, and still be admired for his poise. Meanwhile, you make a single, shrewd remark, and they call you calculating. It's clear. Money earns comfort, but nobility earns reverence. And you, being practical, begin to wonder if there's a shortcut. The medieval ladder of status isn't built for climbing, but for keeping people in place. Birth is everything. If your ancestors didn't die in armor, or at least attend someone who did, you're unlikely to find yourself invited to the royal hunt. Still, there are loopholes, small cracks in the wall where gold, charm, or an advantageous marriage might slip through. You start by dressing the part. You swap the merchant's sturdy tunic for a velvet doublet. Commission a new coat of arms, modestly invented, of course. Host dinners that could rival a duke's. You even practice speaking slower, as if each word costs a coin. Nobles, you've noticed, speak like they have eternity to finish a sentence. Then you set your sights on marriage. Love, in your world, is a luxury. Titles, however, are transferable property. You find a minor noble family, impoverished but proud, the kind who have more heraldry than coin and offer what they lack: money. Oh, their eldest daughter is graceful, educated, and, most importantly, willing to ignore that your grandfather sold onions. The wedding is grand, filled with incense and gossip. As the priest blesses your union, you can almost feel the social fabric stitching itself around you. By sunset, you are no longer merely a merchant, you are a man connected. But connections, like investments, demand upkeep. You now find yourself surrounded by nobles who smile with their mouths and mock with their eyes. They take your wine, your hospitality, your gifts, and still call you new blood when you turn your back. You're a guest in a world that prefers you as entertainment rather than equal. You try harder. You sponsor jousts, throw feasts, lend money discreetly to titled friends who always forget to repay you. Slowly, grudgingly, the ridicule turns to politeness, and politeness to acceptance. You are no longer the merchant who got lucky, you are the benefactor who makes luck look respectable. But the cost is steep, your merchant instincts. Those sharp, efficient habits that built your fortune don't translate well here. Nobles spend coin like it's a rumor, endlessly and without proof. They build pleasure gardens while your ledgers quietly bleed red ink. You, who once weighed every deal like a jeweler with scales, now find yourself buying falcons and velvet cushions to maintain appearances. You catch yourself missing the market, the clamor, the smell of bread, the rough honesty of trade. Among merchants, your worth was measurable. Among nobles, it's a matter of perception, which is to say, pure illusion. Still, there are advantages. You now dine beside knights, speak with bishops, and even receive letters from the royal court. A distant cousin of your wife hints that the king may soon knight merchants who serve the realm. You prepare, of course, funding a bridge, donating to a hospital, discreetly ensuring the right people notice. When the day comes, it's strangely quiet. You kneel, hear the clink of steel on your shoulder, and rise to polite applause. Sir, the title fits oddly, like a borrowed cloak. But it's warm, and for the first time in your life, no one dares correct your manners. Later at the feast, you raise your cup and look around the hall. The tapestries shimmer in candlelight. Laughter ripples like wine being poured. You realize with faint amusement that the nobles have been chasing wealth all along, just as you've been chasing their status. The difference is you were honest about it. There's irony in this, an invisible thread tying every peasant, merchant, and lord together, the same hunger to be seen, respected, remembered. And as the musicians play and your new peers toast your ascent, you find yourself thinking of the city below the markets. The guilds, the restless energy of people still fighting for their first coin. That's where life happens, you realize. Up here, the air is too thin for real work. Still, when the herald announces your name and title, you can't help but smile. After all, you've spent a lifetime learning how to make the system bend. Why stop now? But noble or not, wealth has a way of vanishing when you stop watching it. Somewhere in your fine estate, a letter awaits bearing a seal you don't yet recognize. It's a news that will test just how durable your new identity really is. You've gained your title. You've traded your merchant's ink-stained fingers for a noble's jeweled ring. Your fortune gleams in fine tapestries, stone walls, and silver goblets. But now, a new thought keeps you awake at night. Not the fear of losing what you've built, but the fear that it might die with you. In the Middle Ages, wealth without heirs is like a candle without a wick. Bright for a moment, then gone forever. The merchant in you once thought of profits by the season, by the voyage, by the ledger. But the noble you've become thinks in generations. You no longer seek to earn wealth. You seek to inherit immortality, and that means children. Your wife, dutiful and delicate, understands this better than anyone. She has been raised in the art of legacy, how to bear sons for the family name and daughters for alliances. Each child born in your household is not simply a blessing, it's a statement of survival. When your first son arrives, the bells of your estate ring. You host a feast that lasts for days, wine flows. Coins scatter among the servants, and a priest blesses the cradle with words about divine favor. For a moment, you feel untouchable. The bloodline is secure. But wealth, like life, doesn't flow evenly. The years that follow test your patience and your pride. Children are fragile in your age. Fevers, bad milk, or a chill in the night can undo all your careful planning. You start funding the local church hospital, not just out of piety, but as a quiet bargain with fate. As your children grow, you begin to see your legacy take form, though not always the way you imagined. Your eldest son, born to privilege, sneers at the smell of the market. He doesn't know how to weigh a coin or bargain without offense. His hands are soft, his dreams abstract.
Ow.
You built a fortune from dirt and sweat. He plans to inherit it by posture and charm. Your second son is different, clever, restless, too much like you. He asks questions about trade, about ships, about the price of grain. You see the spark you once had, but the rules of inheritance don't favor second sons. In this world, the eldest gets the land. The rest must carve their fates elsewhere as priests, soldiers, or husbands to richer brides. You begin to understand why so many noble families fall apart within a few generations. The first man builds, the second enjoys, the third forgets. It's a pattern as old as wealth itself. And then there are the daughters. You love them dearly, but know their futures depend on dowries, glittering packages of silver and silk meant to buy stability in another man's house. Each coin you tuck away for them feels like a small surrender of power. Yet without those coins, they'd be nothing but noble ornaments, doomed to fade behind cloister walls. You find yourself making alliances, choosing suitors, negotiating futures, as if they were trade routes. Marriage, you realize, is just commerce with better music. One evening, your wife speaks softly by the fire. You've built so much, she says, but what will they build? Her words sting because you know the truth. The wealthiest man in the world cannot pass down his hunger. Still, you try. You take your sons to the counting room, show them the ledgers, the maps, the contracts sealed with wax. You tell them how to smell a bad deal before it's spoken. They nod politely, then return to their music, their hawks, their poems about love and virtue. You're proud of them? And yet you sense the distance growing, a silent gulf between the world of work and the world of privilege. It's the cost of success, invisible but inevitable. As the years pass, you turn more toward legacy projects, a chapel bearing your family crest, scholarship for poor boys at the monastery school, a bridge that bears your name, strong enough to outlast memory. You know, deep down, that marble and mortar might preserve what blood cannot. One night, your second son sits beside you in the candlelight. He asks if he might go to Venice to trade, to learn, to risk. You hesitate, then smile. Maybe that hunger isn't lost after all. And so, you watch him depart, a single ship sailing into dawn, carrying not just your wealth but your hope that something of your spirit survives in the next generation. Because in the end, wealth isn't measured in coins or titles, but in how long people remember your name. The merchant in you built fortune from nothing. The noble in you gave it a name. But the father in you, he wants something greater, a story that doesn't end when the candles go out. By now, your hands have grown softer, your beard grayer, and your house quieter. The shouting of merchants and the jingle of coin have faded into memory. You no longer chase fortune, you fortify it, because in the Middle Ages, every man who climbs high enough eventually asks the same question. How do you make wealth last forever? And the answer, at least for your time, is simple. You turn your silver into stone. Castles, churches, monasteries, the real vaults of the medieval world. Coins, rust, parchment, burns, heirs squabble, but stone endures. So you commission masons and sculptors cartloads of granite and limestone and begin to reshape the skyline in your image. It starts humbly, as all grand things do, fortified manor to protect your lands, wall high enough to keep out envy and thieves. But once the foundations are laid, your ambitions take root too. Towers rise where the horizon once was. Windows stretch taller. A hall appears that could seat a small army, or at least your in-laws. You pace the echoing rooms and imagine yourself as something eternal. Each stone feels heavy with significance, each arch a kind of prayer. You carve your crest above the doorway lions, perhaps are eagles, or some fierce creature meant to convince future generations that your blood was noble long before your money was. And yet the masons know the truth. They've seen it before. Merchants pretending to be born from knights, bankers trying to look like saints. But they take your gold gladly, shaping immortality one hammer strike at a time. The work is slow, painfully so. Years stretch into decades. You learn to measure time not by seasons, but by scaffolding. Every few months, a new wall rises. A year later, a tower. Whole generations of laborers will live and die without seeing the final roof beam set in place. Still, the rhythm comforts you. Stone is honest, never flatters, never lies. It doesn't gossip about your origins in trade, or the smell of the market that still lingers faintly in your clothes. Stone simply exists, indifferent but loyal. You find yourself wandering the construction site at dawn when the air smells of wet dust and lime. The workers nod as you pass. Their hands are thick with calluses, their faces streaked with mortar. You envy them, in a way. They build things that outlast them, without ever needing to own them. And you've built everything just to be remembered. One afternoon, a stonemason shows you a block freshly carved your likeness, meant for the chapel wall. You stare at the face, stern, noble, uncomfortably idealized. The eyes look heavenward, as if they already know how history will judge you. You nod, pretending it's perfect. But secretly, you wish it looked more like you, tired, a little doubtful, still human. The castle grows, and so does its symbolism. It isn't just a home. It's a message to anyone who ever looked down on you. The message says, I was here. I mattered. My family will stand when yours has turned to dust. But there's a quiet irony in it all. The stronger your walls become, the less you venture beyond them. You dine by candlelight in the great hall, listening to your own footsteps echo through the space built to impress others. Your children grow up surrounded by luxury, but far from the world that earned it. You've traded the marketplace for a mausoleum that breathes, and yet you can't stop. You sponsor the building of a church in the nearby town, complete with stained glass depicting your family's piety. You donate land to the monastery, ensuring the monks will pray for your soul long after you're gone. You even fund a new well for the peasants, because nothing says redemption like fresh water engraved with your initials. It's not greed now, it's legacy. Death is coming, but if you can etch your name into enough surfaces, perhaps it won't matter. On the day the final stone is laid, you climb the tower to see it all from above. The fields stretch in every direction, dotted with roofs and spires, all things your money touched. The wind hums against the battlements. For a moment, you feel oddly at peace. Then you notice the mason's marks along the parapet, strange little symbols, initials left by the workers who built your dream. Their names won't appear in any ledger. Their families will vanish into the same soil they dug from, yet their hands, not yours, truly shaped this place. You smile at the thought. Maybe legacy isn't about ownership after all. Maybe it's about contribution. As evening falls, the stones glow with the last light of the sun. You touch the wall beside you, rough and cold, and feel a strange comfort. Someday, centuries from now, someone will walk these halls and wonder who you were. They might read your name wrong or not at all, but they'll feel what you felt. Ambition, endurance, the quiet ache to be remembered. That, perhaps, is enough. By now, your castle stands tall against the horizon, a monument of pride and persistence. The masons have gone, the markets have changed, and the scent of fresh mortar has been replaced by beeswax and dust. You, once a restless merchant with ink-stained fingers, have grown older, not poorer, not richer, but different. Somewhere along the climb, you stopped measuring your fortune in coin and began to measure it in time, the Middle Ages. For all their chaos, taught one lesson to every soul with a pulse. Time was the truest currency of all. Kings could hoard gold, peasants could pray for miracles, but no one could buy a single extra hour. And yet, as you sit beneath the heavy beams of your hall, listening to the faint creak of age in the timbers, you realize that maybe, just maybe, you've learned to spend it better than most. You rise each morning slower now, not out of frailty, but out of choice. The world no longer demands your haste. You've escaped the tyranny of the bell tower, the shouting of merchants, the desperate rhythm of profit and loss. You walk your lands not as a man in pursuit, but as a man in reflection. The air smells different too, cleaner, thinner. The marketplace used to smell of sweat and spices. Your hall smells of wood smoke and parchment. Even the sounds have softened. Where once you heard the clamor of coin and the chatter of rivals, now you hear the lazy coo of doves in the rafters and the distant hum of peasants threshing wheat in the fields. This, you think, is wealth. Not the overflowing chest or the jeweled goblet, but the luxury of silence. The leisure to notice the small things. The way sunlight dances in the dust. The way bread tastes when it's not eaten in haste. The way time, when it finally slows, becomes something you can almost touch. You begin to see why monks called time sacred. For them, each hour was an offering measured in prayer, in bells, in labor done without hurry. Once, you scoffed at that. What kind of man wasted daylight on contemplation? Now, you find yourself keeping your own quiet schedule. A walk before dawn, a meal at noon. A cup of wine at dusk, sipped slowly as if it were the last. It's strange, this peace, suspicious even. You've spent so many years chasing opportunity that idleness feels like a trick. But you've learned that the truly rich aren't the ones who move the fastest. They're the ones who can afford to stop. You start to notice your past reflected in small things. The scar on your thumb from the days of trade. The faded parchment of an old contract. The once vibrant crest above the hearth, now dulled by soot. They're all pieces of time investments that didn't yield gold, but memory. Sometimes you find yourself wandering through the chapel you built years ago. The candles burn low, and the light flickers over your stone likeness in the wall. You stare at your carved face, eternally young, untroubled, unblinking, and feel a quiet irony. That man was certain time could be conquered. The man standing before him knows better. Outside, the seasons perform their endless barter. Winter trades frost for spring's first green. Summer bargains with autumn's golden surrender. The peasant's children have children of their own. The merchant roots you once fought to control now belong to others, and yet the world continues, calmly indifferent to your ambition. And still, your wealth works in subtler ways. You pay for repairs to the church roof, not because it earns you reputation, but because you want to leave things better than you found them. You host feasts less frequently, but longer, preferring slow laughter to loud acclaim. You even find joy in teaching your grandchildren the art of counting, though they always seem to prefer skipping the dull bits of arithmetic. Sometimes you imagine your younger self visiting this hall. He would likely sneer at the slower pace, demand to know what happened to the fire, the hunger, the thrill of risk. You would smile at him, poor foolish creature, and tell him the truth. You never stop being hungry, you just learn to crave different things. When the wind blows through the arrow slits, you think of all that time has bought you, not luxury, not safety, but perspective. The kind that turns noise into music, urgency into rhythm, ambition into meaning. And so, one evening, as the sun melts into the horizon, you take a walk beyond the walls. The fields hum softly with crickets, and the earth glows warm beneath your feet. You breathe in the scent of soil, that same dirt where you began your climb. It's the same dirt that will one day take you back. You smile, realizing the final secret of medieval wealth. No one truly owns anything. Not castles, not titles, not even time. You can only borrow it, spend it kindly, and hope you leave a little behind for others to find. As the last light fades, your steps slow. You look once more toward your castle, the silhouette of your ambition against the deepening dusk. It stands firm, but so do the trees around it and the stars above. Stone will crumble someday, fortune will scatter, but the moments you lived fully, quietly, consciously, those were your truest treasure. You turn for home, hearing the faint echo of your own footsteps. They sound content, unhurried. You've finally mastered the richest art of all, the wealth of time. And so, you rest not in the marketplace, nor in the echo of the counting house, but in the quiet space between memory and dream. The world of the Middle Ages fades around you now, the hammering of masons, the calls of merchants, the whisper of parchment and coin. What's left is softer, the hum of distant bells, the sigh of wind through stone corridors, the faint warmth of a fire that has burned long enough to become a companion. You've walked through fields of mud and gold, through sweat and incense, through risk and reverence. You began with empty hands and a hungry heart. And somewhere between the dirt and the marble, you found something better than fortune, perspective. Because the truth is, wealth in the Middle Ages was never just money. It was time and faith and stubbornness. It was the will to build a wall high enough to outlast yourself, or the patience to weave a single cloth that might clothe generations. For every rich man carving his name into stone, there were countless others who built quietly with labor, with care, with endurance. If you think about it, not much has changed. We still chase security, still measure success in glittering symbols. But the greatest riches remain invisible. The peace of a full belly. The comfort of warmth on a cold morning, the freedom to rest without fear. These were luxuries then, and they still are now, just repackaged in softer lighting and faster clocks. You can almost imagine your medieval self sitting by that same fire, stirring the embers, thinking the same thoughts you do today. How fleeting everything feels, how impossible it is to hold on to what truly matters. And yet here you are, centuries later, breathing quietly in the dark, remembering people who once dreamed the same way you do. That's the quiet miracle of history. It reminds us that we've always been reaching for the same light. So, take one more deep breath. Let the clatter of coins and the weight of ambition slip from your mind. The stone walls are sturdy, and the candles are low. Outside, the stars have begun their slow procession across the ancient sky, marking the hours not in profit or power, but in peace. You've earned this stillness. Let time itself do the rest. Good night, traveler. May your vaults be full, not of gold, but of gentle dreams.